I've always viewed myself as an optimistic type of person, but when it comes to media, admittedly, I can be kind of pessimistic at times. So when it came to a Renaissance-era themed musical comedy, my excitement level wasn't exactly sparked through the roof. Galavant is an 8-episode miniseries musical comedy that is normally the kind of thing that I would see and immediately write off. It is a personal shortcoming, I know. And more than anything, Galavant was that slap-in-the-face reminder to not be that asshole that judges something just by not even watching it. I know that pessimism is not a good thing, but when you have so many years of crappy TV, crappy video games, and crappy movies that you've been suckered into investing time and money into, you can see where it comes from. Not to mention the ridiculous amount of reality TV out there. I f***ing hate reality TV. Except for you, Deadliest Catch, you're cool. But even going into Galavant with some pessimism, it was only a couple minutes in that I was just like, this is awesome. To describe the general feel of it, it's in some ways almost Monty Python styles of humor a lot of the time, which is a comedic style I feel is very rare these days. That's for the non-musical parts at least. The songs still maintain a lot of that same style, but at the same time, there are some songs that if you told me Trey Parker and Matt Stone had a hand in writing, I'd believe it. That's not the case, obviously, because they weren't involved with this project, but it has somewhat of that kind of comedic musical vibe to it here and there. In other words, there's plenty going on with it to catch your attention, but there's also plenty about it to dissect, so let's break it down bit by bit. The story of Galavant gets laid down fairly well in just the opening sequence of the show. Galavant is a dashing, handsome man in love with the gorgeous Madalena. But when a nearby king of wealth and stature named King Richard rolls through town, he asks for Madalena's hand, and when she refuses, Richard just kidnaps her. And when Galavant goes to rescue Madalena at the royal wedding, things take a pretty unexpected turn, throwing Galavant's plans all out of whack and sending him home alone and brokenhearted without the woman he loves. Fast forward about a year, and we have Galavant set again to travel to the Kingdom of Valencia to rescue Madalena, along with the rest of the subplots that develop along the way, that for the sake of keeping this mostly spoiler-free, I just can't go telling all right here. The main cast of characters for Galavant isn't overly deep, but there is plenty brought to the table with secondary characters, and the main characters are all very strong. Obviously, among the main characters, we have Galavant, who is portrayed from the opening as the quintessential Renaissance-era alpha male. He ruled in every way, a fairy tale cliche. Madalena is the damsel in distress who Galavant is out to rescue from King Richard, but she's also prissy, demanding, and not shy about somewhat abusing her newly gained pseudo-royalty. Speaking of royalty, King Richard is fresh off of conquering the Kingdom of Valencia, but comes off as pretty much a polar opposite of what you'd think of somebody conquering kingdoms. Off the Wall is almost a mild description of King Richard, and just about everything he says and does is totally brilliant. Rounding out the main characters, we have Isabella, who's small and cute and ethnically hard to pin down. Isabella is the princess of Valencia, whose kingdom has just been taken over by King Richard, and she ends up on the long journey with Galavant back to the kingdom throughout the season, although we learn early that it's not entirely with the best of intentions. Secondary to all of them, we have Galavant's squire Sid, who's the third wheel with Galavant and Isabella as they journey to Valencia. Gareth, the king's guard to King Richard, along with the chef and the jester, both who play pretty decent roles in things. All of the characters, though, are very well done, and for the most part, all have pretty funny and unique traits about them to add life to most of the scenes they're on screen. Not to mention, I feel like throughout the season, they each have at least one instance or two to humanize them and really make you care about each one of them. I'd like to dive more into the detail of each of them, but this section was more of just an intro to them all. What really makes them stand out is for the next section of the review. Ave, 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 Ave. I feel like it probably doesn't need to be said that the genre of musical comedy miniseries doesn't exactly have a formula for success to work off of. So even attempting something like this is a bold endeavor. And like I said in the opening, the old school feeling humor style is also a rare breed these days. And when I say old school, I mean the style of humor in like the late 70s, early 80s kinds of off-the-wall humor. I know I made the Monty Python comparison earlier, and I also know that's a lofty label to place. And while even something like Monty Python and the Holy Grail is still totally next level above Galavant, the styles and deliveries of jokes are in somewhat of that same mold much of the time. There is also plenty of time, though, when dialogue and just scenes in general feel a little more on the generic side. But not enough to be any kind of deal breaker with the show. I mean, it's only a first season. Things tend to take a while to find their groove. Regardless, the idea of this whole thing in general was bold, and the execution was great for the most part. It goes so above and beyond just a regular scripted series with the implementation of the musical elements of the show, and it's obviously not reality TV because, it's good. Let's talk about the look of everything first here. The sets are pretty standard for a Renaissance era type of TV show, as are the costumes. Nothing overwhelmingly stunning visually, but also nothing that's an eyesore. Sets and costumes are pretty par for the course. With this being a musical show though, obviously the music is going to be a huge part of things, and like I mentioned earlier, the music is pretty great. Although I will say it's not slam dunks across the board, but it's rare that any show can do that in every way. It's also worth noting that even though there's the comedic elements to the songs, even sometimes mixing in some obvious adult themes, there's still a heavy Disney vibe to a lot of the songs as well. I mean, it's ABC, so obviously Disney had a hand in things, not to mention the show's creator was a writer on several feature-length Disney movies. Does it seem hypocritical to mention similarities in musical style to the likes of the South Park guys' music, as well as also have obvious Disney themes in there as well? Yeah, it definitely seems hypocritical, maybe even almost unimaginable. But that's the vibes I got, and it totally added life to everything. Overall, Galavant is just a whole lot of fun. There's some quotability to it, especially with King Richard, and plenty else memorable about it. But there are also a handful of lulls in the enjoyment of things, which again, aren't unusual, especially for a first season. Some dialogue is bland and feels a little bit like filler at times, and I think if this were maybe just a 7-episode season, as opposed to an 8-episode season, that might have been ideal. Also, there's a song here and there that you just kind of feel like didn't really need to be there. Seeing as how they set things up for a second season though, I'm interested to see where it could go from here if it does indeed get renewed, and I really, really hope it does. Despite a few imperfections, this show tried something new, and they did it well for any show, let alone trying something a little bit bold. There are still the occasional lulls and things, but there's plenty more good going on for it that makes you wanting more by the end of every episode. It's definitely not perfect, but it is a lot of fun, and it's definitely something that you should check out. With that said, I give Season 1 of Galavant an 8.5 out of 10. So that's it for this review. If you've seen Galavant, you have any thoughts on it, please comment them below, as well as any thoughts you may have on this video. And as always, the other things, like, subscribe, all that stuff. But above all else, everybody, thank you for watching. Hey everybody, thanks for checking out this video. If you haven't subscribed yet, click the text above where it says subscribe, and the annotation will take you right there to do it. And below that are links to a couple other videos I've done, both of which I think you'll probably enjoy. Check them out.